Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Double D team. Sorry, just wanted to make sure my volume levels were good enough. Um, so tonight, man, I just can't get right tonight. Sorry about that. It's just like one thing after another. Anyways, I want to switch it up a little bit from the um topics that I have been talking about. Whether that's other YouTube channels or current events. I was wanting to talk about just how it is like to be like a parent or to be a kid for that matter in today's world. I think every generation has probably steadily said, it's gotten harder to become a kid, or and vice versa. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of the older generations that feel like it was tougher for them in certain ways, and it's gotten easier for kids nowadays. I kind of agree with both sides. I feel like there was things that made life easier for the older generations back then, but then there was things that were tough about growing up, in previous generations, and vice versa. I feel like a lot of the kids have it easier for the most part in certain ways, and then I feel that a lot of the kids, a lot of the generations nowadays, have it tougher in different ways. Um, I feel like it was a little more easier to, as long as for the most part you worked hard, you could make a living and establish yourself in previous generations. I feel like nowadays, even the middle class is getting attacked. Unless you're upper middle class, and I don't even think they're barely making it by. I think you have to be pretty much on the upper classes to survive nowadays. I mean, I seen the price of eggs today. I know this is kind of going off topic, but it's ridiculous. If I would have thought this through um, years in the past, and I probably would have came off like as a doomsday prepper and a straight up weirdo or whatnot. I would have bought heirloom seeds. I would have bought property outside of town. I would have done all this ahead of time. I was just going through a lot, just trying to survive myself and be there for my kids, to the point in which I had a whole lot of other things on my mind at the time. But anyways, I feel like going back to the main topic of things like the generations previous, I feel like they've had it harder because they had to physically, I think, work to get what they needed, or to survive. They actually had to put in the elbow grease. Parents were probably a lot more strict. I'm pretty sure there's a lot more parents that were probably hitting their kids back then because it was allowed more, a lot more probably abuse back then than there is now. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not abuse nowadays. There's probably plenty of abuse that's still going on, but probably not to the degree that child abuse happened in previous generations. 30 years ago, 60 years ago, even 100 years ago. Um, I think that's what previous generations probably had in regards to why it was tougher, to survive. They had to get out and start working and maturize a lot quicker than I think people nowadays have to. I think the maturation process of generations in the past was a lot more expedited than it is nowadays. I feel that most people it takes people to the age of 30 to fully maturize and get where they need to go, including myself to a certain degree. I didn't reach my full maturization process, until my 30s. I felt like for various reasons, for various factors that played into that. Um, let's see. When it comes to why I feel that they might have it. Let's just go now to the forward. Let's stick with why people have it hard. Let's go with today's generation. Why does today's generation have it hard versus generations back then? I think that there's a lot more pressure on a lot more peer pressure, a lot more societal pressure. I think everything's um, videotaped, everything's saved. Whether you think that, oh, but I erased it or I deleted. Nothing is deleted permanently. Nothing gets erased permanently. There's always a record of everything. I feel like there's so much distractions. I feel like people that were supposed to be leaders are not true leaders anymore. So there's not as much examples for younger generations to look up to. I feel like there's probably a level of hopelessness that probably hasn't been felt since the Lost generation. That's the generation that Ernest Hemingway. That's the generation that came before the greatest generation, World War II. So I feel like this generation really does feel like they're trying to make the world a better place, and there's so many factors that are against them. Um, I feel that this generation probably, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good individuals that are coming out of this generation, but I do feel like there's a level of and it's not their fault. I think it's the generations before that are making it even more like having a divisionist view. I feel like this generation they they really stick to who they are, and that's because of the older generations that are kind of stubborn themselves, that are saying, "Oh, I'm gonna stick with just this view, and that's what I'm gonna think," and you're gonna stick with that view, and that's what you're gonna think, and we can't agree to disagree. We just don't agree, and we that's it. That's including like my family. Not to go off topic a little bit here, but even like my own brother, there's a lot of good information that he talks to me about, a lot of good information that he researches online. But my brother right now, he hasn't had like a steady job in a while, and I feel like he delves deep into the rabbit hole of looking up a lot of random subjects and watching a lot of suggested videos based on what he's already seen. So when you get in a lot of confirmation bias like that, it's just making him ingrained more into what he believes. Which, I mean, his beliefs are very strong already. Um, I mean, just an example of one situation that came up the other day. He was talking to me about just patterns and numbers, and I almost felt like going down the rabbit hole of the matrix. And he was saying how 369 is the universal number, and I'm not saying that he's wrong. I'm not saying that there's no substance behind it. The It looked like the information that he got was from a mathematician that his whole job is to find patterns with numbers in application to the world. So I mean, if that's that guy's job for a living, if that's what he does for a living, of course he's gonna find patterns in every single. I mean, he's gonna find a pattern in my sweater that I'm wearing. He's gonna find a pattern in this beard hair. You know what I mean? There's certain patterns that make up structures of everything. I mean, of course, duh. I mean, everything has some sort of formula to it. And it is interesting, to a certain degree. I just feel like my brother delves deep into the abyss of this genre to the point where you could kind of get lost in translation. And then from there, I mean, we could go on and talk about the other endless subjects that we have debates on when it comes to like news outlets and news sources. I had shown him a video on Vice because I like Vice. I know there might be a lot of individuals that work there that might be left leaning. I just like them for the fact that they're raw, uncut, uncensored, and on the ground setting. They're talking to people whether they agree with them or not. They're talking to all individuals. So I like that they're out there and actually researching stuff and seeing it firsthand, And he uh, he right away he right away said, "Oh, I don't watch Vice. They're leftists and they're radicals and their news information's unreliable." I'm like, I mean, each outlet's gonna have some unreliable biasness to it, or bias to it. They all have an agenda, you know what I mean? Not one side is worse than the other. They all have their hidden agendas, Some go about it different ways, but I wouldn't say one's better than the other. But anyways, I think that's why kids have it harder nowadays because it's so overstimulating with all this stuff that's out there nowadays. Um, I feel now when let's go in regards to why they both sides have it easier than the other previous or future generations. I think this generation has it a lot more easier because there's a lot more. I think a lot of things are given to them. A lot of things are not expected of them as much. Oh, it's okay. He'll match rise when he's 30. It's okay if you don't graduate high school. It's okay if they have kids. It's okay if they mess up. They're bound to learn. Yeah, I see that point, but there's a point in which you expect, like even like my own children, I expect them to improve upon the last generation. I expect them to get better. Isn't that the point? I mean, I'm not expecting them to live a worse off life than me or live with more difficulties than I have already. Why why would I even want that? So I try to teach them. I try to instruct them. I try to help them learn things, ahead of time, so they know what to expect, and they're not kind of walking into things like I did and like, I don't know how to go about this. I feel like not that much is expected of them, and they have too much freedom to the point, and they have too much power nowadays. I feel like the parent's role as a parent has been just taken away by the government or by whatever institutes. We can't do this now, we can't do that. I'm not saying to abuse your kids, but I think there should be a certain level and degree in which respect should be, and there's no should be, expected. And I don't think there's a expectation of respect nowadays. Nobody respects anybody, let alone kids. And kids are watching this. These people that are supposed to be role models, and they're seeing that there's no respect in the world nowadays. So there's no really guidelines or expectations of kids unless you're very good parents and you do set certain standards. Other than that, I think the vast majority of kids are kind of hopeless. Um, let's go ahead and go with the previous generations, older generations. I think they might have had it a little easier because they don't have to deal with as much like different things like I just mentioned. Lack of expectations. Everything's on social media. There's no role models to look up to. Life was a little bit more simpler back then. Yes, I know that other things were probably not great about those times. Non-intolerance towards people that are different. That didn't fit the social norms back then. Um, I mean, but when you look at overall society back then, it seemed like it was structured in a way in which gave some sort of order. You know what I mean? Gave some sort of stability. Um, I feel like the older generations didn't have to deal with as much, essentially, which made life easier for them. I want to hear what your guys' take on this is. Is it easier now, or was it easier back then, or is there even a right or wrong answer? Is it both were easier and harder equally in different facets or in different ways? Um, that's a good question. Who knows? Maybe there is no answer. The reason why I brought this up to begin with is, how I told you I was going to use this channel or this platform almost not almost, but in a way, in a sense, like as like a journal or a daily thought, outlet. My son's been going through a tough time, and I recently dropped him off at a program, so it's been weighing on me, you know. But with that being said, I'll let you guys go for the evening. Thank you for listening. Take care.